We've had a change in our agenda today. Mr. Rabbi Ingram will not be able to make it, so we have Imam Musri and Reverend Brian Fullwider. My apologies.
No problem.
And we just want to thank you all for coming and as we debate.
All right. Well, it's good to be with you all, and we're glad to be able to share conversation with you on religion and democracy in America. There is another quote from Abraham Lincoln, who said that democracy is the worst form of government in the world, except for all the rest. In other words, I think what the president was saying is that democracy is still pretty difficult, and it's not perfect. It's certainly not perfect in our particular kind of Jeffersonian democracy, as we often refer to it, hearkening back to, obviously, Thomas Jefferson and his work. But democracy is, by all accounts, a kind of understanding within human organization, self-organization politically, that values the idea that human freedom is a core value and essential, that every human being, every woman, every man has the right to make decisions for themselves. And within the context of a democracy like ours, which is based on laws, as long as we are living within those laws, we have basic rights and basic freedoms to exercise ourselves in a variety of ways, and one of those is in terms of religion. The First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, what's called the Bill of Rights, possesses a number of freedoms. Who can tell me what some of those freedoms are? Anybody? Yes. Free speech, absolutely. A couple of statements about religion. We'll talk about those in just a second. Anything else in the First Amendment? Pursuit of happiness actually comes at the beginning of the Declaration of Independence, but that's good. That's in those founding documents. Freedom of assembly. You can get together with your friends, like places like this, but you can also get together with your friends to protest things. Think of the situation with Trayvon Martin and the protests that are happening around not only our area here, but also around the country in regard to that terrible incident in our own backyard. So the right to free assembly, the right to a free press is within that First Amendment. And the two things that it talks about in terms of religion say this, that the government shall not establish any religion. It's called the Non-Establishment Clause of the Constitution. That the government has no business in terms of the establishment of religion. That is the task and the purview of individual citizens and groups to organize themselves around their religious practices and beliefs, to gather into communities, to develop their own sets of regulations and practices and rules and structures and so on. So the Non-Establishment Clause. And the other part of that is the free exercise. The government shall not hinder the free exercise of religion. So there are two things that it says in the First Amendment of the Bill of Rights in the Constitution. One has to do with non-establishment, the other has to do with free exercise. Those are absolute hallmarks of our democratic system in terms of religion. So when we talk about religion and democracy, we have to start with the First Amendment to the Constitution and understand what those mean. and understand that they are sacrosanct, that there is hardly a scenario in which one could imagine that those would not be upheld by the majority of Americans, no matter where they are on the spectrum, whether they are highly religious in a very, very conservative or fundamentalist kind of religious practice, or whether they are completely non-religious and don't have any affiliation with any religion at all. Almost everyone would agree the government ought not to be in the business of creating or establishing religious institutions, and the government ought not to get in the way of the free exercise of those by individuals who are abiding within the law. Now, from time to time, those issues get cross-wired in terms of the free exercise clause. So when, for instance, a Native American religious group in some area is using a peyote or another kind of hallucinogenic in their religious practice, then the government may get involved to ask the question, and they have to ask the question from the non-establishment free exercise clause. And so some things that seem rather wild and bizarre in terms of religious practice may be quite permissible under free exercise protections of the Constitution. And other things that infringe upon the safety of society have to be questioned. So we see in the news all the time, report after report, of issues around religion. A community, a closed community that practices polygamy, for instance, may be under scrutiny by the government in regard to the treatment of people within that structure of system. Is it infringing on their basic human and civil rights? Those are questions that the government can ask in relation to religion. But understand, religion gets a very wide berth in this country, and I don't really think much of us, or many of us, would want a much different scenario in terms of how we deal with the issue of religion. Let me stop there for a moment and just kind of see if there are thoughts or questions about that whole issue of the constitutionality kind of piece of religion, free exercise, non-establishment. Any thoughts on, yeah?
Well, right now there's an issue going on between the government and the Catholic Church, where the government is
Right.
trying to make Catholic schools give contraceptive to their students.
Okay, and that's an interesting question. Is that actually what's happening? The question that's being raised by the Catholic bishops is a question of the constitutionality, as I understand it, of under the new health care laws that are called Obamacare by many, and that seems to be accepted by both those who are for it and those who are against it, so we'll use that term. The requirements that every American is to have health insurance. And actually, when you begin to boil it down, it really affects a mandatory reality for about 7 to 10 million Americans who currently don't carry any insurance and will be required to do so. The rest are or will be covered under a variety of programs, either insurance from their employers, private pay insurance, Medicare, Medicaid, other kinds of programs for insurance. So the question is, once you are required to carry insurance, are you required to carry insurance that provides for contraception and contraceptive medication or any kind of contraceptive, either oral or otherwise, in your insurance program? And the Catholic government the Catholic Church is saying the government cannot force them in the insurances they provide for through their various institutions to require that there be contraception covered under insurance. That's the issue as I understand it. There are a couple of things about that are fascinating. First of all, this issue has not been raised before until now, as the mandatory health care issues begin to be enacted finally under the plan of the president.